What's up, guys? Nightwolf here, and I wanted to kind of talk about a little topic that's kind of important to understand. And, everybody knows about fan outrage. Some of us always have it. I mean, this channel has a bunch of videos dedicated to not liking certain things. Although I think I'm relatively more calm about it for the most part. I do get angry and I do get frustrated. And there's a lot of outrage for a lot of different things all over the world and all over the spectrum of nerd-related culture. But I wanted to talk a little bit about comic book-related fan rage, because that's a very, very unique subject to me. And the reason why is because it's this tweet. I think it was about a day or so ago, and I saw this on my feed. And this is kind of idiotic to some extent, but I wanted to point it out. It says, I wish Twitter was around when Emerald Twilight dropped. How was Hydra Cap before Cap? And that was him. Though Jeff Johns changed that later. And then it shows what happened to Hal Jordan with the whole Parallax initiative. Or, not Parallax, but, when he went mad and destroyed Star City. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because fan outrage for comic books have existed probably since the beginning of comic books, especially for dedicated readership. The only difference between then and now is the fact that it's far more easily accessible. Not only are books more accessible thanks to digital distribution, but also the ability to communicate with the creators is far more accessible now than it ever was before. In the past, the only way you could interact with creators and tell them whether or not you didn't like something that they were doing was through either letters or at conventions. That was it. That was your limit. You didn't have Twitter. You didn't have Facebook, Instagram, whatever. You didn't have any of those things. And I'm going to give you some examples to prove my point that fan outrage has existed pretty much for a long amount of time in comic books. Because here's the thing about comic book fans that's a little bit different than other fandoms. Well, it's maybe not different, but with comic book fans, they're probably some of the most resistant individuals to change. They don't like change. Change either scares them or pisses them off. And it's because, they grow up with the characters. They spend years, decades reading certain characters. And to either dramatically change them or turn them into something that they have never been does tend to piss people off. Even those who aren't continually reading the books on a regular basis. A good example, when I found out that Spider-Man died twice while I was away from comic books because I didn't have a shop in the area, I got pretty miffed on both cases. The one not so much on the first one, when Ultimate Spider-Man Peter Parker died and Miles Morales took over. That was okay. That was handled really well, and that Peter Parker got to go out a hero. But when the original Spider-Man, 616 Spider-Man, died in issue 700 of Amazing Spider-Man, I was livid and pissed off because it was the worst way for the character to go I'd ever seen. And I've seen Peter nearly die countless times. I'll also add that in. Now, I didn't have Twitter at the time. I couldn't go and complain to the creators that I didn't like these changes or anything of that nature. But I'm just pointing out that the outrage is always there for comic book readers because they're so dedicated to certain characters and the way that they normally see said characters. To the point where some people refuse to accept certain stories that are considered canon because they just don't want to think about it, or those particular elements of the stories are normally forgotten and pushed aside and retconned out so that no one ever has to be reminded of the folly of that story. Now, he mentions this thing with Hal Jordan and whatnot, and that it was inevitably retconned to change, that he didn't just go mad and, kill everybody, kill all the Green Lantern Corps. Because here's the thing. What that story tells you, or that particular story didn't tell initially, was that, if I remember correctly, Hal's entire home city was destroyed. Everybody he ever knew or loved was dead. All the characters that he'd had connections with and history with for several decades, gone. In the blink of an eye, gone. I don't even remember who was responsible for the tragedy of it, but gone. What happens? It drives him insane. And I think that for the most part, it'd probably drive anybody insane. Maybe not to the point of committing mass murder, but still to the same extent, it would drive people insane. Is the story well received and well loved? Probably not. Probably back then everyone was pretty pissed off about it then too. Here's some more good examples for you. What about the death of Robin? Death in the family. When Jason Todd died. You want to know what happened? Bunch of people complained. Bunch of people talked about it. I think it may have even been in news reports that Robin died, and that the fans were the ones who voted his death. And a lot of those people who were outraged and upset didn't even know that it wasn't Dick Grayson. They grew up with Dick Grayson. They didn't know that there was a new Robin, because they grew up or they just stopped reading books. All they knew was Dick Grayson as Robin. They didn't know Jason. Interesting, huh? How fans were generally outraged about the death of a character that wasn't even their character to begin with. There's an interesting point. Another one. This one's probably the best one that I can come up with off the top of my head. The death of Superman. You want to tell me that people weren't outraged, intrigued, or pissed off that Superman was killed? Or that it wouldn't have had a similar effect nowadays? Oh, believe you me, it had an effect on people. That was an American icon that got axed. Just like Cap being a Nazi now, that was a big deal, killing off a character like Superman. A little story. One thing I would recommend is that if you have ever seen the animated, I'd recommend go out and buy Superman Doomsday, the animated feature by DC Comics, or find a way to watch it. Because it was a good film, but go to the special features of said film and listen to what the creators had to say. Because their original plan was not to kill Superman. The original plan was to marry him and Lois. They were building towards it, they were planning it, but due to, I'm going to try and keep it short, but due to certain constraints, they had to go back to the drawing board and start all over. Inevitably, they decided, let's kill Superman. Because they didn't have any other idea for a long-standing story arc, so the decision was to kill him. And they did, for a short period of time. And then made a bunch of big special issues, special covers, all the pitfalls of comic books. But one thing that happened that I think is relatively interesting is that a lot of people were angry about this decision. A lot of people got mad that Superman was killed. And you want to know what else? The creators got death threats then. They had to have security at conventions because they were actually legitimately afraid that someone might come and hurt them. Because some people actually tried to. Don't go telling me that the outrage is a new thing, because it's not. Fans are passionate. They get outraged over things. Sometimes those changes are minor. Sometimes they're major. But it doesn't change the fact that it happens all the time, and has for a very long time. Like I said, the only difference now, people can be far more vocal and voice their opinions far more, like I'm doing right now. Like I said, there's outrage. Of course, granted, at the same time, the one thing I will say, it's not cool to send creators death threats. That's not cool. Sure, if you want to, you can insult them. You have free will. I would recommend just having civil conversation with them, because that's what I always try to do. But unfortunately, creators don't see my format of criticism as constructive, so they either block me or call me names. But, yeah, don't threaten a creator, obviously, because that's just not going to get you anywhere, except for maybe in a jail cell. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please, if you enjoyed this, leave a like, shoot a comment, and subscribe for more videos. And as always, do not forget to raise your nerd flags high, and I'll see you next time. Nightwolves out.